Blessings. All right, so we're here on our part 2 of our webinar series on how to kick off the new year. And just to kind of have more of an overview from our first part, we focused on meditation, we focused on scheduling, we focused on having a set schedule, and basically how our waters are affected through the moon as well. That's one of the major things that we discussed about. And having a practice and how important it is for us to have a regular practice, because that is what shapes our environment. That is what assists us. And those are the tools that we discuss on what are the tools for balance. And let's see, and most importantly, meditation. So coming down to meditation is perhaps the most key element within our practice, within our rituals, within our daily way of living. And if we are capable of even squeezing in about 5 to 10 minutes of meditation, it makes a huge difference. So as we go in and dive into this second part, I would like for us to take a nice deep in breath. One more nice deep in breath. All right. So as we're grounding into this space of less stress, more connection. So coming back to what I was saying was that meditation is one of the most important tools and practices that we can create to have more of a less stress-free lifestyle and environment. And when it comes down to our meditation practice, meditation is always going to be a tool for us there. It's literally there throughout the day, while we're shopping, while we're driving, while we're washing dishes, while we're showering. We have it in the active days, not only just sitting on a meditation pillow or complete silence or alone or just at a meditation center. It's actually something that you create by coming back to your center, coming back to your core. And when we have these tools within us and knowing that we can create a moment of just stillness of our mind, it's literally you have the power in your hands to create the most ideal lifestyle and journey, and truthfully extremely peaceful journey throughout the day. You are empowering yourself throughout the day by being present. And that is one of the most important pieces as we walk through this earth, because we are constantly given opportunities to grow even further as human beings, as a soul, as a spirit. And if we are capable of coming back to our center, coming back to our core, our hearts, like I mentioned, we're able to overcome so many things. So coming to the rituals, our practice, our daily practice. So as I mentioned in our previous webinar, we talked about if we can overcome our morning, if we can complete all the things that we can do in our morning, we are able to overcome the entire day. Okay, we're able to do whatever it is, whatever life gives us or throws to us. We're able to completely overcome it and feel even more empowered of what else is there. What are the other things that I cannot do that I'm going to give myself the opportunity to overcome it, to be there, to be present with it, to fulfill the things I have yet to fulfill. And one of the most important pieces is coming back to your breath when you rise up in the morning. When you're coming back in the morning and rising up, you are taking that nice deep in breath and fully bringing your spirit into your body when you rise up in that early morning. And by you doing that, you are taking that next step forward. Okay, this is how I'm preparing my day, my ritual, my movement. And then, you are stretching, you're bringing yourself fully into your body. And then as you move on forward, then you have the remaining of your rituals. Perhaps is making yourself a shake, or most importantly, exercise, stretching, and also having a good, nourishing breakfast. So when it comes down to that morning ritual, you want to be able to check off the things that you would like to complete in the morning before you head out for the day. Granted, there's perhaps some of you that may have early mornings where you start your morning at 6 in the morning, so you only have time to just rise up and get change. And I know that's the most difficult piece. But if you're capable, or a possibility, to just perhaps bring in a few more minutes in. So maybe you put in your alarm clock a few minutes earlier so that you can come back to your center. So you can come back to your heart, your breath, your practice. And by you doing that, that automatically shifts on how you are seeing the day, how you're seeing what you can do, and change the patterns and the habits of what you're used to doing. Because granted, we do have our routines. And if knowing that we're diving into this new year, what are the routines? What are the habits? What are the patterns you would like to overcome? And that right there is the most important piece. Because we do have our patterns, we do have our habits. And if we're trying to embrace and create a new habit, a new pattern, a good one, a great one, that can bring us even further from what we achieved from last year or from the years before that. So our mornings, that is the first thing. And why do I mention as far as having less stress, more connection? Because when we're able to come back into ourselves, and most importantly in the morning, and then we go out to the world, most likely we are encountering many different people when we go out to the world. From us driving, and we're running into traffic or rush hour, perhaps picking up a coffee, perhaps people at a shop, or even our co-workers. Or maybe you don't have that. Maybe you work from home. But even having that interaction alone, how is it that you can start your day with presence, being present with yourself, with your heart, with your breath, where from there it could allow you to be more present within your journey throughout the day, and which then allows you to be like, okay, you know what? I overcome and I achieved the things I was able to achieve for the day. Now, how is it that I can also be present with other people when they are either frustrated or angry? Perhaps they had a tough day. Perhaps they had troubles at home. Perhaps they didn't have a chance to really start their day as intentionally as you did. And that's where our mind shifts. When we begin to have a meditation practice, our mind shifts on how we see the world. And it brings us not just in our head, but it brings us back to our hearts. Because we are reminded of how we are so connected with the universe and how we're so one with God. And by us being one with God, we are also in touch with the many human beings and animals and like every being on this earth. But in order for us to even recognize that, we need to first be able to recognize ourselves. And so as we have that practice, we are creating less stress. We are creating a stress-free environment and lifestyle for us. Because things won't trigger us as easily as it did before when we're able to come back to our breath. Now, can you imagine, like, most of the time, a good percentage of my clients I work with, they want to quit smoking. Now, I'm a hypnotherapist as well, but a good percentage of them doesn't actually address it through hypnotherapy, which has been great. But one of the major things that they notice is like, well, the cigarette calms me down, is what they would say. And it's true. It does. But it's not the cigarette. It's actually what the cigarette does. The cigarette gives the person opportunity to inhale And then slowly exhale. So what is actually doing is reminding the person to breathe, to take that deep inhale for that moment. And it's actually a few, because sometimes they smoke the entire cigarette and sometimes they do half of it because they don't need that much. But so can you imagine switching that, where perhaps you're not a cigarette smoker, which great, so this would perhaps be a really good practice for you. Or if you are, seeing if you can apply that same method without the cigarette, where you're taking in fresh air, where you're taking in your breath and cycling it within your lungs and then setting it free. I'm not sure, you may notice that sometimes when we're angry or when we're triggered and we're set off by something, we hold our breath. He's like, and we like are still and like, all right, let me not react. That is where we need to breathe even deeper and be more present in our body and be more like, okay, just breathe. And we are truly reminded of this. And that's what's beautiful, is that our breath brings us back, and our breath brings us into our lungs. And what's surrounded by the lungs, our heart. And our heart right there is right sitting there. So it's coming back to our heart, it's coming back to our compassion, our love. And so this is where the practice of pranayama is really great. It's amazing. But how is it that you can create perhaps a moment throughout the day where you just focus on your breath? So maybe that can be one of the things that can be one of your practices, where taking the time for 5 minutes throughout the day where it's just your breath focus. And then perhaps about 5-10 minutes focus on breath and meditation. And seeing how that can create a change, a shift, not just for your lungs, not just for your heart, but for your minds, on how that shifts everything. And it just begins with you. It begins with you and consistency. Your dedication for yourself, for your love, for your peace, for your stress-free lifestyle that you are creating for you. And so as we move into that, we then move into expectations. Because in life, I know we have this idea, we have this flow where we have a good amount of expectations of like, okay, I expect for my day to run this way. I expect not to run into traffic. I expect that my boss will have this accomplished, or my boss will get to me this, or my boss will never disrespect me. Or we have a high expectation of a few things, especially within our relations, within our family, our partners, within any type of dynamic that we experience. Even for ourselves, we have an expectation of ourselves to be perfect. And of course, we have to note that we're not perfect, but we do have opportunities to be present with what are the things we would like to achieve. And when we hold expectations, we are most likely going to be disappointed when we hold them towards a person. And this is where, when we have a practice of meditation, when we have a practice of our breath, when our expectations are not met, how can we step back, set our expectations to the side, and just be like, okay, I'm noticing that I have this expectation from this individual. Let me take it easy. It's okay, because I'm pretty sure they had whatever reason that they had. But I'm not saying that as a form of giving them an excuse. It's more of, how can you bring more peace to yourself and not create disruption, not create more of stress within yourself because you weren't fulfilled, because the areas of yourself could not receive what you wanted. And I'm not saying that we cannot receive that. I'm saying it's more of, how can you bring more peace to yourself? How can you hold that for yourself and not give your power away to others? And that's actually a really, really big practice where we are not disappointed by others and our expectations that we have with them. Instead, we're giving ourselves a chance to create more peace whenever we're disappointed for a second, and then step back and be like, all right, it's okay, because I need to just let it go, set it free, be free. Because we know that things happen. Whatever reason that they could not fulfill that expectation, we have to keep in mind that things happen. People have their own story. They started their day wrong, or I don't want to say wrong, but off. They didn't have a great start as you have. And so how is it that we can empower them just by being like, all right, well, I could imagine the things you perhaps had to go through, or perhaps not even say anything at all, where you are just like, okay, no worries. And so we all have our struggles, and sometimes we forget about that. We forget that everyone is struggling in some form of way, and they have their journey, they have their life, they have their family, they have their situations, they have their health situations. And sometimes we don't keep that in mind because we are in our own stuff. But the more present we give to ourselves, it broadens our energy and our love to be even more present with others, and creating more of an understanding, bringing us even further within our hearts, bringing us further where we are love, bringing us closer to God, where God has always created that space for us to feel safe. But then also when we create that space for us, we're also able to hold space for others. But of course, firstly, being able to hold it for yourself. So moving along, so this is where the rituals comes in. Now, I know I mentioned this in the beginning as far as having meditation practice and being present, where it takes us into our compassion, our hearts, our love. The rituals are the first things that we need to have. And granted, I don't want to have that kind of locked in, but rituals are important. Rituals are something that if we can dedicate ourselves for ourselves, it literally shapes and ripples effect throughout the entire day, where we are able to share so much of ourselves throughout the world. Now, what do I mean? So let's say, for example, I'm going to share with you my rituals. My rituals in the morning, as soon as I rise up, is I take a nice deep in breath, and I am saying my grace, my gratefulness of rising up for the day. And then I take a moment to focus on my breath. So I do pranayama. And then from my breath, I'm stretching, I'm moving my breath throughout my entire body. And then from moving that, I slowly rise and I sit right into my meditation pillow and I light a candle. And that's where I go ahead and set my intentions that I'm here and that I'm present and that I'm grateful. And I focus it on silence, because the silence and the stillness is where is going to ground me so that I can be present and still throughout the day within me as everything else is moving around me. Now, that's one of the great perfect days of how I can do that, right? Now, just to kind of give you a whole circle, moving into the evening, most importantly, I also work with herbs, sage, palo santo. And the reason why I also work with these is because they also hold an essence, the spirit of the plant. It has been used for thousands of years as rituals, in the sense of clearing, in a sense of assisting and bringing us into the space, the scent, the smell, the properties of it. And sage is known to kind of clear out the space. Okay, so I use white sage. And then palo santo, which is known out in South America. Palo santo brings in energy. So what is it that you want to bring in, Okay, so I start off with the white sage and I clear out. I'm like, okay, let me clear it out. And then from there, I turn on the Palo Santo. And then from the Palo Santo, like, what is it that I would like to call in? Or what is it that I'm bringing in? Love, compassion, presence, stillness, balance. So when I come into my bedroom from the day, I sit on my meditation pillow. I light the sage to clear out everything, because there were probably many different environments I went to that literally just kind of like attached to me. And, because we're all sponges. That's another thing to keep in mind. We are a sponge of our environment. So the sage, like, okay, let me clear myself out because I don't want to carry anything out. And usually having a door or window open is good to just kind of move it. And if you're out on the East Coast, which I am in New Jersey right now, and it's cold, this is where you want to be able to just like perhaps have your door open where the sage is moving out. Then when I bring in the Palo Santo in, I'm like, okay, I'm here on my meditation pillow right in front of my altar. And let me bring myself back into this space, this room, and preparing for the night, for the dream world. Because our dreams are so important. Our dreams is what also gives us a reflection of what has happened throughout the day. And it also assists us in what are the things we couldn't notice or spot out. And then also, most importantly, our practice within the dream world is a connection with spirit, with God. For God relates and communicates with us throughout our dreams. And so by being in that, within our prayers, within our rituals, within our practice, how is it that you can create a ritual for yourself? Or perhaps it is in the morning where you're starting off your day. Or perhaps it's just in the evening where you close your night. So having a ritual is another way to begin to create even more of a deeper relationship with yourself, with your spirit, with your love, with your heart, with God. And slowly you'll begin to integrate and even notice a little bit more of what you're experiencing. Having that connection. And so moving into having more connection, you become more connected with yourself, with your body, with your mind, with your heart, your spiritual, emotional, mental, physical body, all those parts of you. And by you creating more connections within yourself, you're creating even more of a vibrant, thriving self. Where then shortly, you begin to shine. You become more aware, like, wow, I didn't notice I had this pain in my body. Oh, interesting. Let me be present with that pain. Because our body signifies and actually tells us, they have messages. Our body is the speaker for us, for our spirit. So like, for example, if out of nowhere my leg begins to, my knee begins to hurt. And because I am so present and have my practice and it begins to hurt, I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, what are the things that I'm perhaps, and it depends the feeling, what are the things that perhaps I'm walking into maybe not the right way that I'm moving into? Or what is it that I'm holding back from? So there's so many layers into it because our body has so many ways of expressing. And this is where the practice of Ayurveda, which is an Indian medicine, it is a form of becoming more aware of the elements of your body, which is fire, ether, air, water, earth. So again, depending on what is surfacing up, there goes a message, there goes the communication, there goes the connection. And so the more aware you are of these symptoms, the more aware you are of what is it that needs to be seen. Because everything is for a reason. And like, for example, yesterday, I have a regular practice of making sure I go to the gym, do my yoga. And yesterday I experienced later in the evening where my left leg, my calves, swelled up. And I was like, that's interesting. Okay. So I massaged, but then I also had a moment of silence to reflect to what was it. And then prior to that, I feel like maybe about an hour, 2 hours before me noticing my leg swelled up. And it was like just a slight edema, which I've never had that experience before. I started feeling, and because I was so busy, I started feeling this emotion arising. And because my life was so busy, I was trying to get so many things done, I couldn't put much presence into that emotion that was arising. And so instead I suppressed it. And then the situation when my leg came up. And then from my leg coming to my bed and knowing I had my practice and me noticing like, oh, okay. And then when I come into my practice, then I realize, oh, there's more. There's a part of me that was not seen and that needed presence, that needed stillness, that needed me to take a moment to pause. And there was emotions that needed to arise for me to set free. So we all have our stories. We have so many layers of ourselves. So the more present we are with ourselves, the more present we can be for others. And that's the beauty of it. So it begins with us, and then from there we make connections with our family, where sometimes perhaps you may not be able to tolerate one of your family members, which is okay. But when you begin to have this practice, you have to remember your family members aren't the one that is causing you the disruption. It's actually an opportunity of how can you come back to peace while you're around your family members, while you're around coworkers or your boss or your friends that may trigger that. That is where the practice of meditation comes in. And that's what's beautiful and deep because we are able to build with others. And now granted, we are not tolerating their imbalances in a sense if there's any disrespect or anything like that. Instead, we're just being present and acknowledging that they have their own journey. But it also gives you an opportunity to have more connection with yourself and more connection with others, more understanding of where they're at, and then moving even further from where you were at from a week ago, 2 weeks, a month, a year ago. So seeing if you can implement the practice of having a meditation, and also keeping in mind our last week's discussion of having a set schedule, your dedication, your rituals as well, and acknowledging and how everything else really triggers us. But for this part right here, I want to make sure that keeping in mind the meditation practice, your ritual, your connection with yourself, and letting go of expectations. And from there, how we are able to create more connection for us and with others. So many blessings. If you have any comments, feel free to comment below. And if you have anything else that you would like for me to discuss about, we have our last part, which is next Tuesday. And what's exciting is going to be aligned and around the new moon. And our topic that we'll be diving into is how to let go shit and move forward. And what's beautiful is that we'll be surrounding in the properties of the new moon and how the new moon assists us to move forward into our vision, into our intentions, into our goals. So thank you so much for joining me, and may you have a wonderful and blessed day.